Hi, I'm representing CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, and I'm here to talk to you today about tips and skills to navigate college life as an LGBTQ plus student. So, a little background information about me. My name is Patricia Morency. I am a senior mental health clinician. I am a social worker that specializes in sexuality issues, so that includes working with the LGBTQ community, doing sex ed, and also doing counseling on sex and relationships. And fun fact, I am originally from the East Coast. So this presentation is meant to kind of outline a lot of tips and strategies that you can use if you're a part of the LGBTQ community and you're suffering from issues related to anxiety, depression, stress, etc. This is also can be a helpful presentation for those of you who consider yourself to be allies and want, some tips and skills to kind of help out people in the community as well. So common issues that are part of the LGBTQ community include isolation. A lot of LGBTQ folks may feel isolated from their peers, and this effect can be magnified if the individuals do not have a support system in place. Low self-esteem. Because there's a large amount of misinformation in society about the LGBTQ population, a lot of individuals internalize these negativeness and stereotypes, and so this internalization can lead to shame and a negative self-image. Depression. Compacting with the low self-esteem and the feelings of isolation, it can also make LGBTQ folks more likely than their heterosexual, cisgender folks to have issues with depression. And then there's anxiety. Because it is an invisible minority, a lot of individuals may experience anxiety about who knows their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and in who they can safely share that information with. There's issues also in regards to relationships as well, and that can fall into many different levels. So first of all, there's friends. So an LGBTQ person's social network can definitely ebb and flow dramatically as they're coming out to people who they consider to be friends. So in other words, as they're coming out, they may lose some friends or they may gain some friends, and that can really shift over time, kind of depending on the situation and who they're coming out to. So there could be times when they have a larger network and sometimes when they have a really small network. It really depends. There's also a lot of issues with family. A lot of individuals often face rejection from their family unit, and that can show up in different ways. It can be manifested in a loss of financial assistance, being kicked out of the home, or being completely cut off from all communication and ties. And then there's intimate relationships or romantic relationships. And so there's a very interesting history in regards to anxiety, depression, navigating intimate relationships for a lot of different factors. And as before and after same-sex marriage has been legalized, I think there's been this huge misconception that just because it's been legalized for the past several years, that means all the problems are solved, and absolutely not. It's not. There's still some issues. And all of that stems from society's perception and view of the LGBTQ community. So even though it's being legalized in the state level, that doesn't mean that people's views about it have changed. Also, in addition, because the community is small, intimate relationships for a lot of these couples can be complicated when your ex-partner can also be the ex-partner of your future partner. And so kind of navigating relationships where everybody knows everybody in certain situations and communities can be difficult. So let's talk about tips and strategies to cope with all these issues we talked about. So I'm going to outline strategies that fall under these three main categories. So the first one is making changes to help decrease your stress, increase your own personal strengths and support system, and then learn to build skills for interacting with the social environment. So I'm going to go through each one in more detail. So in terms of managing stress, there's a lot of different tips that you can find online for stress management. I'm going to highlight 7. So number 1, you want to identify your stressors and see if there are some things within your control to manage better. Number 2, build regular exercise into your life, as well as being part of a healthy, balanced lifestyle and give you more energy. Many people find that working out at a gym or playing a sport can help them to unwind. And if you can't get out, then even doing exercises in your own living room or apartment or home, or wherever you're staying at, walking around, watching videos, and exercising can also help as well, as long as you're up and moving in some capacity. Number 3, make sure that you are eating and sleeping well. Number 5, problem-solving techniques can also be a useful way of clarifying a problem. brainstorming possible solutions, and then choosing one to put into action after listing the pros and cons of each option. Number 6, learn calming techniques such as controlled breathing and progressive muscle relaxation to train your body and mind to become more relaxed. And so you can find these exercises in many different ways. A lot of people use apps, and so one of the most popular apps is called Headspace. There's also Insight Timer, and YouTube has tons and tons of videos that you can watch to help you learn these different ways. So if you Google them, you'll be able to find tons of videos and clips to kind of help you practice that. Number 7, last but not least, consider whether there's negative thinking which is contributing to your stress. Negative thinking can make us worry more than is necessary. Increasing stress and generally does not motivate us to take positive action. And so I'm going to go back to 7 in a little bit later on in this presentation. All right, so the next one is identifying your own personal strengths. So there are many different ways that you can do that. So we're all awesome and we all have strengths, but what I found in my experience working with people is that that's one of the hardest questions for people to answer. What do you feel like you're good at? People have a hard time answering, but there's a lot of things that people are good at. They just haven't had a chance to think it through. So being able to walk down this list in your mind or writing it down. So asking yourself questions like, let me list things that I know I'm good at, compliments I've received from other people, what I like about myself and my appearance, challenges that I've overcome, ways that I've helped other people, things that make me unique, what I value most, and times I've made others happy. Right. So there are many extended ways in how you can practice these, building awareness of your strengths, also through gratitude exercises. So having a gratitude journal, writing down things that you're happy to have in your life, daily or how often you like to, writing a gratitude letter, visiting someone you appreciate, either virtually or in person if you can, taking a gratitude walk, taking a walk around a park or outside and being able to look at the beautiful surroundings around you. All right, so the next one, tips and strategies to cope. Let's kind of go back to what we talked about before, number 7, negative thinking patterns. And I want to split this up into different categories and make a distinction between what I'm talking about. So for negative thinking patterns, it's really important to, especially for the LGBTQ community, is to distinguish the problems that are environmental, distinguish those that stem from dysfunctional thoughts. So I'll say that again. Distinguish between problems that are environmental and those that stem from dysfunctional thoughts. So a lot of times there's negative thinking that's going on. There's internalizing negative thoughts, but we also have to be realistic and understand that a lot of these negative thoughts that people are thinking are actually true. They're actually negative things that were said about people, right? And we're not arguing about that. There's a lot of negative views from society about the LGBTQ community, and it will be really a terrible thing to make people think that, make them deny it. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about here is distinguishing between problems in the environment that we can change and those that stem from actual dysfunctional thoughts. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So if those thoughts are about the environment and there are specific and actual things that you can do to change it, brainstorm strategies and try them. If they are about the environment or society and they cannot be changed, then you want to go find support and validation from others. And so if you can do that in person, that's great. If you can do online, that is awesome as well. So examples are family, friends, your classroom, YouTube, media. All right, so let's break this down into a little diagram I have here. So we're focusing here. Negative thoughts. If you have a negative thought, ask yourself, is this an internal thought about my self-image or my own competence? If so, question the validity of the belief. All right, so I just said it again. So if you are coping with negative and unhelpful thinking patterns that are dysfunctional, they're not true. You want to question the validity of the belief. Question whether it's true and question if it's helpful. And once you find out it's not, then you can start reframing and be like, okay, this isn't actually true. So I wanted to give some specific examples of what I mean when I'm talking about dysfunctional, negative, and unhelpful thinking styles. So this diagram is listing the most common unhelpful, dysfunctional thinking styles. And we're all guilty of doing this in one way or another. But it's important for you to notice when you're having these types of categories of negative thinking so you can pinpoint it and then challenge them. So the first one is all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking. So examples of this is, if I'm not perfect, I have failed. Either I do it right, 100%, or nothing at all. Another example is overgeneralizing. It's seeing a pattern based on a single event or being overly broad in the conclusions we draw. You'll notice that you're overgeneralizing when you speak in absolutes. So you use words as all, every, nothing, ever, never, things like that. So an example here that they show you is nothing good ever happens to me. And when you tend to think in those terms, nothing good ever happens to me, you tend to focus on the negative. Instead of another way of thinking of this, if you're challenging this thought, is to be like, well, statistically, this isn't true. Nothing good ever happens to me. Then you start listing all the good things that are in your life. So practicing those strengths and gratitude exercises. Jumping to conclusions. There are two types of jumping to conclusions. So the first one is mind reading. Imagining that we know what other people are thinking. And then there's fortune telling, predicting the future, specifically predicting something's gonna happen badly in the future. So let's talk about mind reading. Mind reading is really a common example for people, especially if things have happened to them in the past that has been bad. So for example, you've come across a lot of homophobic people in your life. So that's a fact, that's the truth. You've had those negative experiences. And because of those negative experiences, you tend to form the conclusion that every new person you meet is automatically having homophobic thoughts about you. So that's when you want to challenge it, right? Not going to be as homophobic as those negative experiences you've had in the past. So when you challenge yourself, because this negative form of thinking would prevent you from reaching out and making new friendships in the future if you're assuming everyone is going to be as bad as those negative experiences you had in your past. The same thing with fortune telling, assuming that everything in the future is going to turn out badly. So you want to be able to challenge that and be like, okay, this isn't necessarily going to go bad in the future. We don't know. The future hasn't happened yet. So those are just some lists of unhelpful thinking styles and ways you can challenge them. All right, so here's some questions to help you guide yourself through this. Number 1, is my thinking working for or against me? Am I fortune telling or mind reading in a way that makes me upset or unhappy? What are my options in this situation? How would I like to respond? If my best friend or someone I love had this thought, what would I tell them? If someone I cared knew about what I was thinking, or if I was thinking this thought, what would they say to me? What are the strengths and positives for me in this situation? When I am not feeling this way, do I think about this situation any differently, and how? All right, so we're talking about internal thoughts right here. Let's focus to an environment. If the situation or the problem is environmental, yes, and it is within your control, then you want to start brainstorming ideas to change. And how you can do that is by weighing the pros and cons of the ideas to change, and also breaking them into smaller and manageable tasks. So it really kind of depends on your situation. If it's something that you can change even a little bit to provide some relief, then go forth and do it. One example would be, say like you have a friend or someone in your environment that is they're not good. You know what I mean? Like they're not positive, right? They're raining on your parade. If you can find a way to kind of limit the exposure to this individual, especially if they're really negatively impacting your life, then finding ways to do that, right? Maybe I don't have to go to every single event that they invite me to. Maybe I can only go one. Things like that. Those are little things that are within your control to kind of get those negative people outside of your life. And also, if you want to maintain a respectful relationship as well, you don't have to cut them out all the way, but you can kind of think about ways to limit that exposure. Okay, now let's go back to, is it environmental? Is it outside of my control? If it is, like the way society views you, things like that, then you want to find supports in your life or people in your life that validate these painful experiences that you're going through, whether that's in person or online. Community really helps. And so even being able to reach out to that one ally or friend or family member or media figure, YouTube star, TV show, musician. Just being able to have that validation, knowing that you're not alone in your thoughts and you're absolutely right, that this is a terrible situation, but I have people to have my back, can be helpful for a lot of people. So those are some tips that might help you start that process and continue that process. All right, where can I go for resources and support on campus and nationally? Well, the first one on campus is Pride, right? That's the RSO and Pride, and so they have a presence physically on campus and online as well. NWA Equality is also another good resource as well. Here's the website right here, and they have a lot of resources, outreach, social events, groups, education, you name it. This is another good website. The GLBT National Help Center. The hotline.org. This is kind of like a hotline or a text line or support line that you can also get help. The Trevor Project is also a good one too, focusing on crisis intervention and suicide prevention. Trans Lifeline, similar to the ones I talked about before, specifically about transgender folks. And then there's PFLAG, Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas. So that's for allies, specifically parents, friends, and families of LGBTQ folks, for you to get emotional support, information, and referrals. So that is all the information I have for you. You can always call us at CAPS if you need additional resources or support. Our phone number is 479-575-5276. And in case you forget that, it's also in the back of your ID card. It was a pleasure talking to you today. See you later.